and gentlemen, my friends, many speeches have been made on the Constitution. For a long time in our country, we have had to struggle for a constitution. I doubt if any other country in the world has seen as many vicissitudes and buffets of circumstances as this nation has seen in trying to evolve for itself the basic law. Before the partition of the subcontinent also, in undivided India, there were a series of constitutional crises. The Constituent Assembly, which came into being before the separation of the two states, it was an ill-starred Constituent Assembly, and it did not meet as a whole. In our own country, after the last elections, we also were unable to meet as a body, and today now, I hope that after a long and tortuous road, we have reached a stage in our life which can be regarded as a culmination. For a long time, we have not been able to find basic solutions to many problems that afflict the country. Again and again, these issues have been opened and reopened with greater anger and with greater bitterness. Among these problems, the answer to the constitutional problems of Pakistan can be regarded as the most important. Associated with the constitutional problem is the basic question of autonomy. This problem of autonomy also has a long and painful history. I am happy to note, and I am sure all of you are relieved to note, that whether this constitution is unanimously passed or not, and I hope it is unanimously passed, that we have settled the problem of autonomy, which has been the real bone of contention, which has led to conflicts, troubles, a series of problems, and finally the separation of the country. This, in my opinion, I might be wrong, but in my opinion, was the problem of problems. And when I received the demands of some of our friends from the opposition recently, I was glad to note that the demands did not include the question of autonomy. On the contrary, it was stated in the letter categorically that the quantum of autonomy has been satisfactorily resolved and that nobody intends to reopen it. Now, with the basic problem overcome, what were the other problems that troubled us and made us quarrel so much? The Constitution provides for the supremacy of the legislature. In a parliamentary system, the legislature has to be supreme. But the supremacy of the legislature is not unfettered. The supremacy of the legislature has been restricted by the incorporation of fundamental rights. And these fundamental rights have been protected by a provision for the independence of the judiciary. Sometimes when people become sensitive, unnecessary misunderstandings arise. I will give you only one illustration. When it came to dealing with the question of the independence of the judiciary and the future of the judiciary in Pakistan in all good faith. The majority party proposed a certain provision on the basis of the Indian Constitution. The object was not to curtail the powers of the judiciary. The object was not to make the judiciary subservient to the legislature. But since there are many analogous features of the Indian Constitution and our past constitutions, a good deal of borrowing has taken place. And this provision of the Constitution was borrowed from the Indian Constitution. It relates to impeachment, as you know. But as I have already said, it was not done with the purpose of subordinating the judiciary. However, we are alive to public opinion. We form a part of that public opinion. And when we found that there was unnecessary misunderstanding and people felt that this provision was unnecessary, immediately we withdrew it. In other words, the question of good faith and bad faith can only be evaluated when we see each other's faces, when we meet one another, when we are prepared to talk to each other, when under the most unfortunate circumstances and the galling conditions, we are prepared to continue a dialogue. But this is the language of politics. This is the art of politics. Politics is a complicated and a difficult art. And I know that we politicians, all of us, have been much maligned. Perhaps there is some responsibility on our shoulders for being maligned. But nevertheless, the fundamental lesson that I have learned from political science is that in the most adverse of circumstances, in the most excitable moments, in the most volatile and vitriolic periods, one must always maintain a sense of balance, a sense of equilibrium, and that at no stage should a point of no return be reached. What happens when a point of no return is reached? A point of no return becomes disaster not only for those in government, it becomes a disaster for the whole society, for the entire social order. And pray, who should know this better than the people of Pakistan? This country has suffered because rapidly we have made ourselves reach a point of no return. Rapidly we have allowed ourselves to become rigid and bring small matters as matters of prestige. And in this way we have done irredeemable damage to the poor and unfortunate people of Pakistan. I therefore tried to keep the doors open for our friends in the opposition throughout this period of time. I know that we have said something which might have hurt the opposition, because in these battles people become not only sensitive, they become ultra-sensitive. We might have given cause inadvertently for the opposition to feel upset and annoyed. But we also believe that on occasions the opposition, our friends sitting there, our comrades here in the House, have also been harsh. I might be wrong, and forgive me if I am, but I believe that on moments you have also been harsh if we have not been too kind either in our dealings. We and our party have come to this place and assumed this position of responsibility after a long and a ceaseless struggle for the attainment of democracy. Finally, the verdict lies in the hands of the people and in their judgment, whether we have trampled democratic order and democratic tradition, or whether we have upheld democratic traditions and democratic order. It is not for me or for you or for one party or another to decide who is the great dictator. Whether we have become the great dictators or whether we are espousing the democratic road, that is an answer which time and again, not only in one election, but throughout the pages of the history of Pakistan, the people of Pakistan will have to give, because this country has had enough of its dictators. We never want to dictate. Our entire attitude to the Constitution, to this bill, if you examine it dispassionately and without a partisan attitude, you will find it has been based on democratic conceptions. We have maintained discussions and maintained links with the opposition from the inception, from the moment I took over the responsibilities of Pakistan at a grave and critical hour. From that very moment, my attitude and my party's attitude and my government's attitude has been positive and constructive, rational and reasonable. Whether it has been on the various accords we have reached with the opposition or otherwise. We had 2 accords to bring into being provincial governments. We had a constitutional accord. We continued discussions after the constitutional accord. And then again on the 2nd of April and the 4th of April. But here, while coming to the assembly, when I was approached and told that our friends want to have a further discussion, even at this late moment when the hour had struck and I was to enter the chambers at 11:30 to say these few final words on the Constitution bill, I was told that the opposition would like to discuss with me certain matters, and I welcomed them to my chambers. And we discussed the issues that have now been raised virtually at the time when the Constitution bill was to have been passed. I do not think that you can find a better manifestation or a more sincere evidence on the part of the government to pursue the democratic road and to follow democratic tradition. And this, in this spirit, we have made some adjustments. I would not call them accommodations. I would not call them concessions. Far be from me to use such an unpleasant word on such a pleasant day. I would say that we have gained by your wisdom, we have benefited by what you have had to suggest, because we are not making the Constitution for one government or for one man, no matter how uncharitably you might make that charge against a person and a party who have received an overwhelming majority from the people of Pakistan, and at a time when the government was hostile to this party and its leadership. Nevertheless, if you have certain other ideas and conceptions of democracy, I will have to be re-educated on what democracy means. Democracy means the rule of the majority. Democracy does not mean the imposition of the minority's will on the majority of the people. When the majority is overwhelming, we call it brute majority. When the democracy is by a narrow margin, we call it a tenuous majority. Now, where do we draw the line? If it is a tenuous majority, we then say, what right have 51% of the people to dictate to 49% of the people? as Mussolini kept on decrying democracy in the language of percentages. When we have a slim majority, then the people say it's not a stable government. The majority is so small that it does not reflect the genuine will of the people. It is not a quintessence of the essence of the people's will. And when you have an overwhelming mandate, when the people overwhelmingly repose confidence in one leadership and one party, at that time you call it a brute majority. Or we call it a brute majority. Now, somehow or the other, sooner or later, we'll have to get together and redefine the lexicon of politics in our land. Because we cannot have one principle on one occasion and another principle on another occasion. We have the facility of arguing diametrically opposite to the point we have taken in a different set of circumstances. And this is a facility which I think is so rare that we can consider it is a tribute to our genius. But we are a difficult people. And I am glad that we are a difficult people. Because that shows that we are a vital and a varied people. We do clash, we fight, we quarrel, we've got a lot of energy. When I was in Simla, a certain Indian politician told me that why should Pakistan have so many problems, or why can't you manage the problems of Pakistan? We have many more provinces than Pakistan. Now in Pakistan, only 4 provinces remain, whereas in India we have 23 or 21 or how many provinces, I forget what he mentioned. I said to him, but we have the 4 most difficult provinces in the subcontinent. So always be. Historically, they have been a free people. If you see the history of the subcontinent, see the Northwest Frontier Province, it's always fought for its individuality, its personality, its freedom. They have fought the British, they had the Afghan wars, they have that tradition, they have that history. Balochistan also has its pride, has its history. Punjab as well, it has had its separate history, its entity. So also Sindh. All these 4 provinces, if you compare them to the provinces of the rest of the subcontinent, excluding of course Bengal, which is a class by itself, but the rest of us, here, the British, they took the rest of the subcontinent with great ease, but they did not these 4 provinces. Punjab was the last of the provinces to fall to the British, and Sindh one but last. And in Balochistan and Frontier, they had one rebellion after another. And so also in Sindh and Punjab. Therefore I think this is a tribute to the people of Pakistan, their vitality, their courage, and also because of these historical factors. Although we are reduced in size, yet nevertheless India never tires of having sleepless nights over the potential of Pakistan. We have held sway over the history of the subcontinent for generations and generations. So then, we do quarrel, we do fight, but then we lay down arms also. And I think a time has come, ladies and gentlemen, when now, over this long period, over this painful and unfortunate past, a time has come when we lay down arms among ourselves. We don't lose our energy in our internecine quarrels. I believe that this day augurs well for the future. After 25 years, we have, after many disputes and quarrels, come to a point where we can say that we have a fundamental law, we have a constitution, and nobody can deny that this constitution does not represent the will of the people of Pakistan. Nobody can deny that this constitution is not a democratic constitution. By any definition of democracy, nobody can deny that it's not a federal constitution. Nobody can deny that there's no settlement over the quantum of autonomy, and thank God for that. Nobody can deny that it's not an Islamic constitution. It contains more Islamic provisions than any of the past constitutions of Pakistan, as well as any of the other constitutions of Muslim countries other than monarchist Muslim countries. But nevertheless, even if you compare them with monarchist Muslim countries, you will find that it contains more provisions on Islam than any previous constitution in Pakistan. And now, what is the quarrel over? The Vice President in his speech made these points cogently. I do not want to repeat them now. We have had a surfeiting of debate on the Constitution, and surfeiting the appetite thickens and so dies. So let us not repeat the arguments that we have been repeating not only during this duration, but as I said, from the day that we were plagued with the question of constitution making, either in undivided India or after that. We had the 1954 constitution. It was almost an approved constitution. The draft had been completed, and the people of Pakistan were to have a constitution in 1954. But alas, unfortunately, that was not to be. And what were the repercussions of that? Again, the Vice President has waxed eloquence on the problem that if good or bad, and as the Law Minister has said, the Constitution is not an ideal document. As an eminent Soviet jurist has said, it is a mirror which reflects the reality. The Law Minister has said that the Constitution can be amended. Certainly it can be amended. But the Constitution is not a holy book. It is the fundamental law. It is the basic law. And there are countries in the world who, after the change in the qualitative situation in their society, they bring new constitutions. The Soviet Union has done that on a number of occasions. The French have done that on a number of occasions. There have been so many amendments in the American Constitution, as has been pointed out by the Law Minister. So this Constitution, my friend, which is democratic, which is federal, which contains the salient essence of an Islamic order and safeguards the Islamic polity. This Constitution which provides for the independence of the judiciary. This Constitution which provides for fundamental rights for the citizen and has provisions for amendment which are not untenable. In these circumstances, I fail to understand why we should not approve of it wholeheartedly, vigorously, with the same enthusiasm we show when we differ, the same vitality that we demonstrate when we quarrel. Let us now put that behind this Constitution. Let the people of Pakistan be blessed with a legal document which they can regard to cement their national sovereignty and their national identity. Let us end this search for an identity. We have been searching too long for an identity. The people of Pakistan, the poor people of this country, have made sacrifices unparalleled. At the time of partition, in the first Kashmir War, in the 1965 war, in the 1971 tragedy, the time has come now when they should heave a sigh of relief. There has been too much tension in the land. There has been too much trouble for Pakistan. So I would request, now that we have returned to the House, to go a step further, to carry this presence of yours to its logical conclusion, and give, together with us, the people of Pakistan, a constitution which will be a unanimous constitution. It has been said by a number of people that every part of the federation must be a party to the Constitution for it to be a federal constitution. I have told some of my friends from Balochistan that I have never denied the need to have the consensus of the federating unit. Even recently when I spoke, I said that we have sedulously and vigorously searched for that consensus. But if the consensus is not forthcoming, it is a fallacious argument to hold that in that event all the federating units must be a party to the Constitution. I don't want to make this into a controversy. I'm just trying to explain a position. That point of view, that each and every federating unit must be a party to the federal Constitution, applies when the states are sovereign and independent, and when sovereign and independent states want to shed a part of their sovereignty and become a part of a national entity. It does not hold good for a state which is already a nation and has provinces within it. This is not a new matter. This question was raised time and again before the partition of the subcontinent, when the Congress party put forward the argument about these questions, and the answer was given that in that situation, that first of all, if Pakistan should reunite with India, it must first become free. Then only it can shed its sovereignty. That is to be found in Quaid-e-Azam's own speeches. That in that case, first we must become free if we are to surrender or consider surrendering a part of our autonomy. This argument would hold good today if the four provinces held that first we must become sovereign independent states. After that we will decide whether we will come into the entity and the nationhood of Pakistan. And not otherwise. But even otherwise, we have majority of the members from Sindh and Punjab, and I believe we have the majority of the members from Frontier. And I hope that we can have the majority or some, even one or two members from Balochistan, because in giving your support to this constitution, you're not giving a support to an individual, you're not giving support to a party, to a government. We are passing phenomena in the scheme of things. You will be demonstrating your bona fides, your good faith, your spirit of nationalism, your spirit of patriotism, if you also now, after these protracted negotiations, when there has been so much of the spirit of give and take, today finally at the end of the road, after having faced so many miseries, after having gone through so many problems, I would say that please ponder over this question and take a right decision. Take a decision in the interest of the common weal. Take a decision in the interest of your children and their children's children. Take an interest in the future goodness of Pakistan, so that we can now concentrate all our energies, all our efforts to the building of this country, to the amelioration of poverty and misery and want. That is the basic question I keep on telling all my friends. That is the basic question to which we must address ourselves dispassionately and with a crusading spirit. There is too much poverty, too much misery in this land. And I believe that if we put our collective heads together in a spirit of understanding, we can resolve many of the problems that the poor in Pakistan face. You must have heard in your ears the whisper that I heard in my ears about the misery of this land when we first saw it and were conscious of it. Any individual, any human being in Pakistan who has a conscience and who thinks that finally he is answerable to God Almighty will consider this to be the most important problem. And let us therefore be the harbingers of a new order for Pakistan, where we can, together, collectively, with our combined strength and might and power, break the vested interests and those forces which have kept this country backward in torment and in misery. This is the task to which we must address ourselves. Ladies and gentlemen, there is the problem of the emergency. I have told you that our effort is to try and bring about normal conditions as soon as possible. The Constitution is a hallmark in our efforts to bring about normal conditions. Once we have provided a democratic constitution acceptable to the people, we would release many tensions. And I believe that the law of progressive dynamics will come into play, because events carry their own momentum. And if events are allowed to carry their own momentum, I believe we can come closer and closer to the day when we can lift the emergency. I would like you to believe me, even if you do not want to, that I am not happy with having the umbrella of emergency over Pakistan. I would like to see this umbrella folded and put away. If we could have moved on from one step to another, restored provincial autonomy, brought about this constitution and other developments that have taken place in the last 15 years, I believe that we can move ahead also rapidly and with your cooperation to the day when we can lift the emergency. But I tell you sincerely that today I am unable to make a commitment on this matter. I wish I could. We are harassed from all sides. We are troubled from all sides. The problems that you face and your government face are harrowing, and they are a multitude of problems. I don't want to spell them out because again you might say that I am trying to make out a case. I am not here to make out a case. I am not here pleading to make out a point of view. I will give you this much assurance that as and when, and I hope the sooner the better, that objective conditions permit me and permit my government to lift the veil of emergency, we will be happy to do so. But here again we need your cooperation. We need your cooperation because we have to move ahead imaginatively in our relations with the subcontinent, other parts. This is a part and parcel of the era of emergency. We are prepared to move ahead fast, rapidly, for the normalization of the situation in the subcontinent. If you rally around us for this cause, which today or tomorrow will have to come, and in which we cannot dictate the terms. Terms have been dictated by the compulsion of events. Either today or tomorrow we will have to recognize the objective realities and the lasting realities. If we can move ahead in a spirit of cooperation, in overcoming these problems, I have no doubt that we will see the return of our prisoners of war. With the return of the prisoners of war and a small decent period after that, small and decent, I believe the external factors will be relatively under control. And then we can meet, because I would always want to meet you and to continue our dialogue and our discussions, because I believe that this is the best way. This is the only way. We cannot shoot our way through, because we have seen that when you shoot your way through, you reach the grave and there is no flower left. The whole land becomes a wasteland. We do not want to make our country into a wasteland. We do not want to see those solutions which are regarded to be the easy and the obvious solutions. They are not the easy and the obvious solutions as we saw in 1958 and as we saw to our peril in 1969. So then, these are the major problems. But how can I end today what I have said without paying a tribute to the House? All of you from both sides, holding your point of view, have worked tirelessly, and it has been an exacting task. I am grateful to you, the nation is thankful to you for having met here day in and day out, also having night sessions to complete the task of framing of the Constitution with all the complex background to which I have referred to in broad outlines. The Speaker of the National Assembly is not a new hand in this responsibility. He has been a Speaker before of a provincial assembly as well as of a National Assembly. But on this occasion, he had to perform the dual function of conducting the proceedings of this House both as a constituent assembly and as a legislative body. He has handled his responsibilities with great skill, I must say. And I'm sure we are all thankful to him for the patience and tact with which he has discharged his onerous obligations. So also I'd like to pay a tribute to the deputy speakers who have performed their functions with great skill and admirably. To the members of my party, I am forever beholden, and I thank them for their support, for their cooperation. I would like to tell them that we have gone through many a struggle together, many a difficult time together. And in this time of difficulty, they have been a source of great strength to me. Without their support, and without their encouragement, and without their unity and solidarity, I do not think it would have been possible to have overcome the gargantuan difficulties we have faced in the recent past. To the young law minister, I would say that he has done great service to Pakistan. And it is a good fortune of history that on his young and able shoulders fell the task of giving Pakistan a constitution, of piloting the Constitution Bill. This is not a privilege which can be easily had in our circumstances, in the conditions of Pakistan. He has worked with great zeal and with untiring devotion. He has been in touch with the opposition leaders at all times. He has kept his mind open. He has acted with dexterity, with finesse, with a nimbleness, and he has amply demonstrated great qualities of a legal mind, of a political mind. His illustrious father piloted the first Constitution Bill of Pakistan, the Act of 1954, which I said was to see the light of day, but was capriciously put aside to our detriment. And I'm sure that his father, must be proud of his son today. And I'm sure The sons and daughters of Pakistan are proud of this man today as well. My limitations are such that I cannot do what I would like to do, because it would be against the spirit of the Constitution. The future Constitution of Pakistan does not provide for awards. Up to the 14th of August or before that, until the Constitution is enacted, an award can be given. But as I said, this would be against the spirit of the coming Constitution, of our Constitution, of your Constitution. But if I were a dictator and I did not have any regard for law and Constitution, unhesitatingly, I would give the Hilal-e-Pakistan to Mr. Hafiz Pirzada for the outstanding service he has rendered to Pakistan, to his country, to his province, to his constituency. And you will go down, my young friend, in the history of Pakistan, not as a footnote that some rebel might, but as a constructive, loyal friend and a patriot. To the Vice President, I would also like to say that you have been a source of encouragement and strength to us. Your presence with us is a constant reminder of the great association that we have had with our brothers on the other side of the subcontinent. It is my conviction that sooner or later, in one form or the other, we will come together. It is my conviction that sooner or later, my friend, the Minister for Minority Affairs, Raja Trivedi Roy, will be back in Rangamati and among his Chakmas. This is ordained by fate, it is ordained by history. And we will meet again. And from these meetings, we will build an edifice, a lasting edifice to the glory of Islam, to the unity of our cultures, and to the lasting friendship and association, which has the mark of history on it. Again, to my friends in the opposition, I would like to say that there have been troubles and quarrels. Let's put them aside. Let's meet. I'm prepared to meet. I have the same regard for you as I have always shown. There are problems that agitate your mind. We can discuss them soon, very soon. But let us all meet so that there is confidence and that nobody feels that manipulation is taking place, because we have had enough of manipulation. Let us meet and discuss. Discuss problems on the basis of principles, on the basis of the correct procedures. I closed then my speech, longer than I had thought it would be, on only one note, and that is this Constitution a viable Constitution? Its viability lies in the hands of the people. Its viability lies in the consciousness of the people. Its viability lies in our understanding of our conditions. If we do not take stock of the situation, if we do not learn from what has happened in the past, if we do not repeat the tragic errors that we have made in the days not so long ago, if we pause to think and consider what a certain action will contain, what will be the consequences and repercussions of certain acts, either made out of lack of knowledge or out of sheer ambition or greed, then I believe that this document will stand the test of time. But if we think that it can be cast aside and that there are simple solutions, and all that one has to do is to sit on a white charger with sword in hand and settle problems with its flash, in that case, tragedy of the greatest magnitude will befall Pakistan. So this document is in the vault of the people. The people hold the key to its viability. All we can do is to pray to Almighty Allah that at long last, after many efforts, because no country has had to face as much of constitutional experiences and troubles as Pakistan, that we would now consider this document to be a fundamental law worthy of the respect of the whole nation, and that the whole nation now and the generations following it will protect it with their blood and with their lives. In that situation, this fertile land's future will be, as I have said, the most fertile in the subcontinent. On that, I have no doubt that if we put our house in order, if now from this point we move forward in a spirit of understanding, in a spirit of accommodation and consensus, in a spirit of tolerance, in other words, according to democratic means and methods, there is no stopping this country's progress, its country's power and potential in this subcontinent. And those who do not agree with me will not be Pakistanis, because only Pakistanis and the people who come from these four warlike or difficult or quarrelsome problems know the strength and power of these regions, which constitute the state of Pakistan. So, ladies and gentlemen, with these words I close my speech, and I would request Maulana Kausar Niazi.
After the vote.
Oh, no, I see.
First, the question has to be put to this.
Yes, I'm sorry. Now that I have finished my speech, ladies and gentlemen, I would put the question before you. The question is that the bill to provide a constitution for the Islamic Republic of Pakistan as amended be passed.
Those in favor of the motion may please rise in their seats.
All those in favor of the motion may please rise in their seats. Now do I say all those against it?
Yes, sir. First you will announce those who are, I'll give you the results.
Yes.
And then the motion below, sir, about its passing, those which I have sidelined. This one, sir.
Do I say those against it?
125 in favor.
The vote is 125 in favor. Myself also.
The bill is passed. The bill is passed.
The bill has been passed.